Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger, as you all well know. So considering that I got stuff I got to do, and as you all know, Simba is with me now in Saudi. I have, he gets priority, but this is my week to do the Black Manosphere show of the week. And so this episode is, it's my responsibility, and I'm glad to do it because, truth be told, even though he gets priority because he's here, the fact remains that seeing him and watching him does inspire new thought in me. And sometimes I get these new realizations and I can give them to you. I mean, I learned certain things about his generation from him and from interactions with others. And sometimes moms will say, well, don't poke the bear. And dads will say, no, that bear's poking you. Go ahead and cut the claws off. Or that bear's poking you. Go ahead and stick this torch in his side while it's burning, or something like that. In other words, they'll tell you to resist. Sometimes it's the dad that says, don't poke that bear. And mama's like, nope, we're going to fight. And as you already know, when it comes down to, and this is why I titled this as I did, when it comes down to the Western Anglophone Black woman, they're usually going to say whatever the dad does not say in many cases. And I was very fortunate because I did not face this all the time. And I've not faced this with my son's mother. She's not like that. But I know many of you have faced this. I have seen others go through this right in front of me. And there have been on, some rare occasions when I've been through this myself. I have come to understand that we are going to be diluted if you're going to count purity arguments as having merit. I understand that we are that the bulk of us are not going to remain at current or higher percentages of African blood quantum in comparison to what we may now have. I understand that, unfortunately, those of us who do are going to be, in many cases, either in Black Huxtable environments, Black Cosby environments, and the chances are actually decreased there, are going to be in the hood where there is dysfunction. As a pro-Black and a Pan-Africanist that sincerely is, I am not celebrating that. This is part of why it is that I do say that if and since, a lot of us have been driven away by these Western sisters, that at the very least, you pick someone whose people are not our enemies. And if individually one of them stands out as not being an enemy and really being into you, then what you do to mitigate what Dr. Umar Johnson legitimately fears, which is having descendants that turn on us. That is a reality that can happen. I mean, when I sit up and I look at some of these Arabs here, as he would call them, and I see some evidence of their African blood, but they're ashamed of it. Or when you see even some of the Dominicans who do proudly exclaim that they're not Black, and they don't mean Black American, they mean they're not of African stock. When you really do see people like that, and they do have the inferiority complex, and they're not talking about culture or nationality when they say they're not Black, but they're talking about race, that is someone that comes from us that later on looked at the race and said, these N-words are inferior, and I won't even claim the percentage I do have. That's a legitimate fear. And this is part of why I say that if you do find an individual from amongst the women whose groups do look down on you, then what you do is you go ahead and you offer to her the opportunity to be with you, but in a context removed from her people. I do state this, and I have to say this, and I have to state this for that very reason. It is a must. See, how many South African Indians in Durban can actually speak Zulu and English and can't speak a single language from the home country or the subcontinent of India. But they do not have pro-black sympathies at all in the least bit. They are concerned about just their community, and they don't want to upset white folks, and they could fib a guck. They could not care less what the black population, the original population of South Africa, Zulu or otherwise, thinks and feels and even knows to be factual. Maybe one of the Indian South Africans stands out to you and she's really into you. And what you do is you offer to her a chance to live away from her people. Not in the subcontinent, not in the Indian communities of Durban, but somewhere black. You offer her that. And that's part of why I say that. There is a legitimate fear. I understand that. I'm not celebrating, again, when we put our blood into the populations of those that cannot see us as equals, collectively speaking. That's why it is that when someone gets him a snow bunny, I feel pretty neutral about it. I base it on how and where he lives with that so-called snow bunny. Are they living in the context of her people, or are they living in the context of our race, or are they living in the context of neither one? That's what makes the determination for me. But then I also look, and then somebody gets with a Filipina, and I'm like, yeah, bro, you go. Absolutely. Or a Thai, and I'm like, yup, bet. Or then again, I'm talking in the context of marriage, at least according to their own faith customs. I look and I say, yes, absolutely. The Black Manosphere right now, although everybody's not walking around thinking exactly as I have articulated, does in fact put this into practice. Where do the majority of you BMPTs go? And I am somewhat conflating the Black Manosphere with the BMPTs, even though I do understand the difference in their definitions. The Black Manosphere is, in fact, those that are aware and discuss this online and in person. BMPTs are the Black Male Passport Travelers. I have mentioned this before. And I look forward to the day that we have our own, even if they're just souvenir passports by which we can identify each other. I look forward to that day. I look forward to the day that we're able to have a digital currency that is sponsored by us, that is themed after us. Many people are unaware that there is a Wakandan theme or Black Panther theme digital currency. I don't think it's valuable and taken off much, but there is such. It does exist. And I look forward to the day that there is such with us. But what I'm getting at here is that the Black Manosphere is actually where the pro-blackness resides, because without really talking as pro-black as I do, or as I feel, or as I think, you actually have behaved as such. I've talked about this before, and I'm doing so again because this time I know that there are going to be more that get to hear this. It is no longer pro-black to limit your ding-dong and to limit your romantic and your marital scope and self-impose this limit to only the sisters that give you the worst time. It is not. It is no longer pro-black to do what Dr. Omar Ifatunde Umar Johnson goes for, that which he preaches. That's not pro-black anymore. What is now pro-black is to look and see, okay, who's going to raise the kids the best and treat me the best, because that's a part of raising the kids. Treating well the dad in front of the children, just like you know that it is better for your kids to see you treating their mother well. Excuse me, you already know that. You already have that in mind. Nobody has to tell this to you. You are already raised to be romantic, to cherish a wife that respects you in return. You've already been raised that way. You understand that. And you've been raised to do this for a group of women who will not return this in kind. And unfortunately, this is becoming more and more common in certain parts of our home continent. Shouts out to Mr. Kanga, who has given me insight into what's going on in Luanda. A Cuban in Luanda who actually does psychotherapy made an observation that Angolan women hate Angolan men. Now, this is in Luanda, it's not in rural Angola, but that was an observation that she made. He put this in some comments before. And by the way, Mr. Kanga, I'm going to have to take time to go through the emails. And we started the new semester today, so I'll be even slower going through them. But I'll respond to the ones for which I can type out a fairly quick response. I'll do my best. So even in our home continent, some areas are no-go zones if you were authentically pro-black. You can't go there. You have a better bet in Thailand, the cities and the countrysides, than you do in, let's say, in Nairobi or Luanda or Johannesburg or Pretoria or Lagos. Dimoni. Sick and tired of hearing them talk that stuff. Because there, they will tell you in no uncertain terms that they are for sale. But when you say that they are for sale, they will deny it. Whichever one is the least convenient to you is the one they're going to say, are you for sale or not? When it's time for you to spend money on them so they don't have to spend their own, they are for sale. You must buy them. But when it is time to actually own them after you bought them, they're not for sale. You can't buy them. And when you decide to limit your reproduction, your romance, your marital opportunities to that type of lady, that means that you are actually functioning against the long-term interest of our race. At this point, being pro-black merely means that you avoid the ones, especially reproducing with the ones that cannot see us or whose people cannot see us as equal, and subjecting future generations to an inferiority complex in the event of your passing. That's what being pro-black means now. There is nothing we can do to avoid being what he would call diluted while still functioning in the best interest of your individual kids. That cannot be stopped. And that is not the fault of you, the black male. Western or non, American or non, ADOS or otherwise, Jamaican or otherwise, continental African of any nationality. That is not your fault. You couldn't have done nothing to stop this. The truth be told, what I'm coming to understand about the history is that, frankly, a lot of this hybristophilia that we are seeing in the parts of sisters has been exacerbated in the Western world, but some of that comes from back home. Some of that does not come from the New World. It was exacerbated there and exaggerated. Some of that came from the Congo. Queen Nzinga, as I've stated, was a bastard niche. Did she resist the Portuguese? She didn't start off doing it. She was selling to the Portuguese in the beginning. And then later on, she apparently did put up a resistance. But when you think about it, I mean, when you raise the masculinity of the women, of course, you got to hyper-masculinize the men. And that can lead to notions of savagery in our people. Notions that will not only be entertained and believed by others, but even by some of us. If she was the example for women to follow in her day and age, then that would lead to savagery, because she had the men dress up in ladies' clothing and then fight to the death for her to decide which one she was going to use to scratch that itch. So imagine that in order to lay with your own wife, so to speak, who calls herself your husband and calls you the wife because she's the queen, you got to kill someone else. Stop and think about that. Now, if you're a man of a conscience and character, any sort of morality, and you find yourself in that situation and you know that your refuse is to be executed, many of you probably would sit up and say, go ahead and execute me then. Let's go ahead and get this done. Let's get this out the way, because there's no way I'm going to sit up here and fight and murder or get killed just so I can get up in your funky, musty axe wound. Shouts out to LOM for that. So to be honest with you, truth be told, the Black Manosphere is in reaction to not only what has happened in recent history of the New World, or in recent, let alone recent decades, but it is a reaction partially to what has happened in certain parts of our homeland. Not all of it, of course, but various parts. In all honesty, women acting as they did in the Dahomey Kingdom, as Nzinga did, should have created scandals amongst the people. It says something that it did not, and that they were not overthrown by their own. You have actually taken up the mantle, taken up the torch. And you've actually done it even when you don't preach it the way I do and the way I've articulated it. You collectively have actually gone that mantle. You've gone that way, which is pro-black. Some of you like to go to Scandinavia because you fetishize there, but you know what you're not doing? Those of you that go to Scandinavia, you know you're not sitting up there and shooting the club up and reproducing with them and giving them kids that they're going to take away from you and raise with an inferiority complex. That's not something you hear about being done. What you see is that when it comes down to the marriage and the reproduction, this is being done with those ladies who come from groups that don't look down on us traditionally, like the Philippines, like Thailand, sometimes even Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, quiet as is kept. Some of you are going into, quite a few of you are going into the Black enclaves of Latin America. And that is where your reproduction is. Quite a few of you are going into parts of the continent where you will be treated well and traditionally, such as Ethiopia, such as Tanzania, from what I'm beginning to understand. Some of you are going into Senegal or going into Gambia. Some of you are going to parts of Africa where there are traditional and non-traditional ladies right next door, right side by side. But in those areas, you're making the right decision. You are sitting up and saying, I'm going to get that traditional woman. I'm not going to get the one with the neck rolling and finger snapping, and I'm going to drop her. Shouts out to somebody else who comes from the Gulf Coast like I do. I'm not going to say his name because I don't want to risk one of the ladies hearing this. But if you are listening to Shira 7 under his roof, you are out of there. Bye. That is pro-blackness. He's in the continent. And what he is doing is pro-black. What he is doing is that, number one, he has more than one that he shall marry, I should say. Let somebody listen to Derek Jackson under his roof, and they're out. Let someone listen to Shira 7, and they're out. Let one of them interrupt him before he finishes explaining his idea, and they're out. That is the pro-black thing to do, because what that does is that rewards the traditional women in the same area as the non-traditional women, and it gives them incentive. It rewards the right behavior. They're going to be what they want to be, but the proper choice is the one that is rewarded and therefore incentivized in front of the others. This is the pro-black thing to do. Not to sit up there and do like Umar Johnson is saying and just keep on trying with the sisters and keep on trying and keep on trying. I made that mistake. Keep on trying with the sisters. Because you see, as I told you all, what I faced previously, you now are seeing. It's coming up to you now. What I faced previously now is something that is being offered to the bulk of you. simply sit up and say that the things that what you have going for you, try to get someone that has the same things going for them, or the feminine counterpart and corollary to these things that you got going for you. And you will see that it is not a trade-off. You will see that it must be, the match has to be a loss to you and a gain for her, not just financially either. It must be a loss to you and a gain for her in every single possible way. You not only have to be taller than her, stronger than her, older than her, and make more money than her, but you must be childless while she brings to you another man's kid. The dual mating strategy must be okayed and easy for her to practice at your expense. You were seeing this and you were saying, hell knucking foe. Or fell hucking, no, however you want to say it. And you're walking off. That is why it is that nowadays, what it is that Umar Johnsons preaches, you are now practicing without preaching it. 2020, I was a bit worried. I heard a whole lot of conservative talk, Republican talking points, not conservative. No, conservative. I heard plenty in the space that was sounding exactly like these white Republicans. Well, don't say slavery had anything to do with it. What about what we're doing? Yeah, I heard some saying this. And as soon as I would hear some saying this, I'd be like, okay, see, there goes that white thit. And one tried to tell me, man, I'm not preaching white thit, black mind, but and I just hung up on him. It was on a panel and I just dropped off. I don't want to hear that. These things do have an effect. Sergeant Willie Pete is right about that. They do have an effect. But see, what that shows is that you, black men in general even, are not doing as well as you are doing because there is no barrier against that, no hindrance. You were doing as well as you were doing in spite of this because you've learned to be that good. That's why. When you understand this, then you can understand the proper credit to give yourself. No, black man, you are not God. The black woman is not a goddess. You are not angels, and she's not an angel. You are human beings. If you were God, if you were angels, then it would be nothing for you to do what you have done. You did this with human abilities, and that is even more of an accomplishment. Don't believe me? Ask God himself. He said in the Quran that certain things would be easy for him. You're the one that goes through the test, and you are passing some of these tests with flying colors. Of course, not all, but the test that you are passing, you pass with flying colors. I'm not making any of this up. I'm not talking against any particular faith, but I am talking as a Muslim. God has said certain things would be easy for me, but you are tested with ease and hardship. And what I'm seeing you do, I'm witnessing you do, is pass certain tests of hardship as though they're easy, but you and I know they're not. That makes you more manly and makes you more of an accomplisher. And when I've told you that I'm vaingloriously proud of you, black men, that is the reason why. And you BMPTs, you in the Black Manosphere, even more so because you have accomplished more, not only by effort, but also with intelligence. You have actually not preached my talking points per se, but you have put them into practice, and you have shown if the next generation of functional black youth, black offspring are going to be Blasian, so be it. That was a choice the sisters made. If the next generation are going to be Blackadeshi, so be it. Blackapino, so be it. Black Vietnamese, so be it. Black Laotian, Black Cambodian, so be it. Black Indonesian, so be it. Because that is something that sisters of the Western Anglosphere, and also in some parts of our home continent and not others, chose. And that is even a choice that some Black Brasileiras made as well. When they decided they weren't going to be traditional at all, they weren't going to be nothing that's convenient to you, they weren't going to be nothing you might like, they also made similar decisions. Stephanie de Barros. How's she going to talk about feminism and act like she pro-black and she married to a zaddy living in the States? Man, fit the guck out our face with that sure bit. That's not pro-black. That's anti-black. She mad because Austin Holloman asked the question, not even disparagingly, but she wanted to turn around and lie about the wording. That is something that they know they're doing. And I'm going to tell you, a Nigerian lady I forgot her name, and I don't care. She sat up and said she was coaching men. And she's got several videos like this, pretty much telling women's secrets to men. And I appreciate that. Thank you. One of the things she actually said was, and she was talking about women in general, she said that when you are telling women something, they know exactly what the F you mean. They're just twisting it around when they're arguing with you. That means you ain't they type. If they interpret what you said to be unfavorable to you, and that ain't even what you meant, they know they're doing it. That just means you ain't they type, or they just don't want to believe what it is you actually said, what you actually meant. So they twist it to mean something else. And that is something that has been taught to many of us, even those of us BMPTs and those of us in the Black Manosphere. Many of us. Many of us, even here, have learned this from mama, learned some big sister, from auntie. We've been hearing them sit in the kitchen in the house while they were talking that trash. Because they didn't want to hear it. Even my wife's friend, the one from Philadelphia, one time sat up and said that the thing she missed about marriage was arguing, because men have this need to be logical, and she can just throw out logic and frustrate the men. And I thought to myself, why the hell do you find that entertaining in the first place? But you know what? Y'all might remember me telling you that one of my wife's North African friends, who waited until damn near, she couldn't get married because she put everything off. At least she did find someone. Yep, she did. She is intended now to marry a South African fella. He's also probably around her age. I'm glad she did. I know what she has to do in order to stay married to him. And here's the thing. If she's actually going to live in South Africa with him later on when she's done working, polygyny is legal in South Africa while it's illegal in Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, I think, Algeria, Egypt. It is illegal in these places. Now, in Morocco, I don't know if it's illegal on paper, but they treat it like it is. They won't let you do it. So the point I'm making is that in North Africa, polygyny has been pretty much banned, outlawed, either de jure or de facto. But in South Africa, it's not. So if she does act a mother cuss word fool, he gets to marry someone else and he ain't got to get her permission. Fuck the shuck up. I'm getting this other wife. Now you compete or you lose. Sink or swim, broad. You don't like it? Fly your butt back to Tunisia. Maybe she'll cooperate until she qualifies for South African citizenship. Maybe that's what she'll do. I don't know. I don't particularly care. It don't make a mother cuss more bit of difference to me. The point is, she found someone. But my wife's friend from Philadelphia can't. She cannot. And there's another thing that I have seen. See, while sisters are sitting up here struggling to get anybody, except black men, and black men are preferring them, but they're pushing black men away. My wife's friend from Philadelphia has had to understand something. See, when she's looking now, she now only sends someone to go and talk to black men at this point. Usually they're citizens of here, but black men, she goes and sends someone to talk to black men. She ain't even trying to get a hold of a non-black man. And she was married to one before. But she ain't even trying to get a hold of a non-black man no more. She's not even making that effort. That means she knows. That means she comes to understand when she takes off her niqab and that West African nose and lips show up, they're like, nope, thank you, never mind. Because as we stated, they ain't into sisters that much. Men that ain't black ain't into black women. Who is? That's us. And we've given them chance after chance after chance. I'm not saying that everything that Umar Johnsons said was always wrong all the time. What I am saying is that you have already done this and you have proven that you have to do something else if you were going to keep and solidify the black family. The threat to the black family is not only the woman that comes from a racist group of people, But it is all that. But see, women that come from an anti-black group of people now includes the Western black woman of the Western Anglosphere. And even sometimes Latin America, some of them have that white worship thing going on, colorism to the nth degree. And if that is the type of lady you find, good riddance. But the difference is that if you find one that is not like that, there's no ridicule for her being of a conscious mind and loving her people. And being of a conscious mind and loving her people does not mean she has to be a feminist. So if you marry the Dominican that is happy to be of African blood, proud of it, that doesn't mean she has to be a feminist. If you marry the Colombiana that is also African and she's proud to be of that bloodline, it doesn't mean that she must be a feminist. It doesn't mean that even in Brazil per se. Now, I think they're more susceptible to thinking those things and conflating them. And it's largely because of the influence of the Western sisters, the Anglophone New World sisters of the diaspora. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be that way. You pretty much already know. You get with that Anglophone Western sister that is conscious and says she's proud to be of African origin. And what does that come with? Well, I'm the goddess, queen, mother of the earth, and I ain't got to do nothing you say, because back in Africa, the women called the shots. Well, if back in Africa, the women called the shots, why is it that the Maasai women did not have to kill lions to become adults? Talking about something they call the shots. What rite of passage did they have that involved the threat of physically violent deaths? That alone is one of the reasons that Maasai women outnumber Maasai men. Nowadays, they send the boys out to go live on their own. When they're still fairly young, they're not allowed to take food from any other person. Sometimes non-Maasai have given food to the boys and the boys have accepted it. And when people find out, the boys are killed. This has happened before. They don't have to kill lions now because lions are protected by law as an endangered species. But they still have to go out on their own and live on their own for a particular time. And sometimes they're watched from a distance to make sure they do not accept food from non-Maasai people who see this, this relatively young male out on his own. And like, you know what? Listen, you need some food. He accepts it, and he is seen doing this from a distance by his own, and he is dead. He's not even banished. He's dead. He's allowed to return to his people, and the witness comes forth. He took food from somebody, and they cut his throat, or however they execute such boys, if they can get away with it. I don't think it's that lawless now to where they could, but if they can pull that off now and get away with it, what you think they're going to do? You don't hear about Maasai women having to go through anything like that. You don't hear about stuff like that specifically amongst many of the groups. Does it exist? How would I know? If it does, it's so rare we don't hear about it. That's what I'm getting at. Women having to go through rites of passage in order to be considered adult and old enough and eligible for marriage don't usually involve something that runs the risk of a physically violent death. That's what I'm getting at. But then when some of them have become queens, they call themselves kings, dressed men up as women, called them male wives, and then made some of them fight to the death. Or they just outright mistreated men when they've been at the heads of armies. That's what has happened here. And then you got, in spite of all of this, you have some carrying on the spirit of the daughters of the trade up until now in a real vicious form that includes remaking The Color Purple with nobody asking about this. And I don't have to see it to know what's in BS. I don't have to see it. You all have seen it, and you told me enough about what that means. So that means that we know how bad The Color Purple is, the original and the remake. And in spite of all of this, in spite of being demonized, falsely, not even accurately, you have gone and gotten facts and figures and spread these facts and figures that exonerate us. You, the BMPTs, or just men of the Black Manosphere, have reached out and gotten the message out. And then when someone else digests the message, they've turned around and done the same thing. How else do I have over 4,400 subscribers? That is because of work like yours. Thank you. Let no one come to you and tell you that what you're doing ain't pro-black or that it is selling out. Don't let them tell you that, unless, of course, you're out here actually shooting up the club in the context of the women and their people that would, in fact, lead to your descendants having a complex against you. In that case, maybe so. But the thing is that most of us have decided to not be reckless with our seed anyway, which is evidenced by the lack of those of us donating to these banks, these fertility banks and clinics. I don't even want to call them fertility clinics, sperm banks. We have actually not even donated to the point that when one of us is willing to do it, it sells at a premium. And guess who that's going to be? The bums of us who just need the money. They'll do it. And I'm looking at them and I'm thinking to myself, you know, as hilarious as it is, as funny as it is, that they're saying that we're reckless with the seed. It turns out to be a very small percentage of us that are, because most of us aren't even allowed to be. And yet and still they keep on with this trope. It has not been the sisters that have gotten this message out. The good ones have not been allowed to get this message out unless it's anonymously. Or unless maybe they're just considered to be too old to where women can sit up and say, well, you just mad because you out the game, you aged out or something like that. They're kind of given the pass. They know that what I'm saying is that they're under threat if they do it. And their name and face is out there. Especially if they're young. Especially if that's the case. You're the one that got the message out. And so by the time that Tia Mowry sat up and said that she graduated from Corey Hardrick, just graduated. By the time that came out, we knew we were no longer falling for the propaganda. And what I'm saying is that that's just one example of how you liberated the minds of other black men from the propaganda that caused many of us to walk around with a guilt complex for things for which we are not even and never were guilty. You did that, bruv. And I'm glad you did. Thank you. It's not something I can take credit for. It's not something one of us can take credit for. We did this collectively. This shows that we're capable of cooperating with each other in ways that we think we're not. But in order to do it, we had to stop listening to Sapphire. For some of us, Sapphire was our own sister. For some of us, Sapphire was a trusted friend, auntie, big cousin. For some of us, Sapphire was even grandma and mama. In order to get this out there, though, and cooperate in order to do this, you had to stop listening to them. And the only thing left to do now is to focus more effort on freeing the minds of young brothers who might still be living under the purview of mom and grandma or another Sapphire as minors. That's the work that is left, as well as linking up with the men of these other cultures where they're still traditional so that we can trade the proper information that we need to trade. We need to tell them that from which they must defend the patriarchy, and they can tell us what the patriarchy is like while it still exists. Now, that is valuable information to trade. But you know what? Once this gets out, you are capable of doing that because you've already shown that you can liberate each other's minds and the minds of even some younger brothers. Because younger brothers that are still young adults are getting this. That means that we're pretty much a step closer because they may have younger siblings that are still in the teens and they can turn around and liberate the minds of these younger siblings, specifically their younger brothers, nephews, cousins, and let them know, you know what, man, we ain't no failures. That's not who we naturally are. And it never was. We are not I, not just singular you, but plural you, which means we are breaking cycles. Breaking cycles that have held our population back, even from being an effective community, if a community at all. We are breaking cycles that have left us as nothing other than a communita or a community, something other than an actual community. That's you, Black Manosphere, you BMPTs, Black Male Passport Travelers, or maybe you want to say Black Manosphere Passport Travelers. Either way you want to call that. There's only one word, and even then, that's not going to be very, very far. The two, just one word you can change, and the meanings are still quite close enough to where the other three don't change the actual meaning. Point I'm making is that you are the ones that are breaking certain beliefs, certain erroneous ideas that have held Black men back so that all we ever were was a communita or a community or just a population, something other than a community. But now, with you out here breaking these chains and with many of us doing networking, what is important is that we maintain this, that the BMPTs, specifically the passport travelers, the reblacktriates, turn around and keep in touch with each other. That's what is important, that you keep in touch with each other. Because without each other, your kids are going to come up not seeing very many others of us or very many others like them. It is not a problem that they grow up with kids that are of the same race as half of them. So that's not the issue. I'm not upset because a half Black, half Thai child will grow up in Thailand. I'm not upset about that. I don't want them growing up in the States. That's not the issue. What I'm saying is that we just have to keep in touch with each other so that these kids, these Blasian children, can also know each other. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. That is to say that we're doing the pro-Black thing already, the authentically, truly pro-Black thing. And all it takes is a little bit of foresight and pre-planning in order to keep it going in a way that the future generations can sustain it. As far as some sort of idea of genetic purity that purists are going to entertain, such as Umar and Johnson, well, if the sisters had given us a choice, many of us would have gone with that anyway. We would not have had to be coached or cajoled. It would have never been the case. And one of the reasons that he was talking to the guy on the Joe Budden podcast about that was because that guy's probably not, I don't think he's Black Manosphere, Red Pill aware of any type. Those are the ones with whom he's going to be able to argue. He's not going to be able to actually argue with a so-called YouTubians that actually listened to Mr. Samuels and others before him. Because remember, Mr. Samuels took the message mainstream. He didn't start it. There was a time when he was against it. He had to learn later on, pretty much from the ladies, what was going on. And the same thing with Anton Daniels now of the Lapeef Show. He is now having to learn from the ladies that we were right and he was wrong. And that's the end of it. You see, the thing is that the truth of this was always in the hands of the sistren, the hyenas, and they kept deciding that they were going to lie and say it wasn't true, but keep behaving and choosing paths, they keep behaving in ways and choosing certain decisions that would make this true, that led to the rise of this understanding in the first mother cuss word place. It's like if you sit up and you say someone's a criminal and they just keep committing crimes. Well, they've chosen to prove you correct. And then they do it in front of cameras. They just keep making you correct. It's really up to them. I mean, once you say it, it's really up to them to prove you wrong or correct. And if they keep committing the crimes, they choose to prove you correct because at some point a camera's going to be rolling. You have done the pro-black thing. You were doing the pro-black thing. You are as reproductively and maritally, you are as pro-black as Western sisters and some continental sisters will allow you to be. And you cannot be any more than that. Not maritally and reproductively. It was never up to you to be more pro-black than what they would allow you to be when it comes to those two contexts, which hopefully are going to be the same. It wasn't up to you in that regard. Anything regarding her cooperation is a context in which you are never to blame for not being more pro-black than she is. And we're now finding out they ain't been pro-black, because not only do we have some of them coming into so-called pro-blackness after they played in the snow and let the snow play in them, but we're now having some of the guys that played, some of the snow that played in them come out and say, listen, we've been smashing them. They've been easy. And they ain't trying to tell nobody that we're hitting that. And we ain't trying to tell nobody we're hitting that. So we have an agreement. We slide in. You're sitting up here simping and trying to woo her and all this other stuff with her head wrap on and all that. And we just come slide in. Hey, look, she knows what it is. I know what it is. We ain't going to, neither one of us wants everybody else in our lives to know that we meeting and we bumping and grinding, and then we dip out. And she must not care if I shoot the club up, because then she gets the baby she wants. And she's got her fist in the air in the daytime. So while they were sitting up and saying, well, these brothers are screaming, they used to say that in the 70s, these brothers are screaming black power by day and they're up in white thighs by night. They loved to sit up and say that back then. And what was really going on is that the reason why bros was up in white thighs by night was, number one, is pretty much everybody ain't black was white. That's one thing. But number two, that white woman was checking for brothers, and she wasn't checking for brothers because she was checking for the man that Becky was leaving. That's why. She didn't want that brother screaming black power with his fist in the air in the daytime. She wanted Zaddy that had his foot on our neck. And Becky was sick of Zaddy, and Becky was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and let me see what the older school Ungao was about. I ain't racist anyway. And that's really what wound up being the case. So pretty much even back then, I'm not going to sit up and say these brothers were selling out. I'm not even going to say that anymore. Back then. Would I've done it? No. But what I would say that these brothers weren't thinking about the other options, the third options. I would say that. But in all honesty, when brothers was going into the military, they were meeting women from Southeast Asia, and they've been marrying them. This was going on in the 50s. And this is what I'm going to have to understand. She's been pushing and pushing and pushing. And now, because of social media and because of confessions, they're admitting that they've been pushing us away. And they're, even when they don't admit it, we can still see them doing it. And you have done the best you could have possibly done in that situation. What else were you supposed to do? You have reached out to each other. You have been sharing information. I put up the poll, and I'm still taking advice. And my son sends his thanks to you all, by the way, who have given any feedback from the poll that I put up. I put the information up asking, listen, what would you advise him? Cybersecurity? Coding? Something else? You all are filling out the poll. You're leaving comments. You're explaining certain details. He's doing the research. God bless him, and God bless you all. And I mean, right now he's looking on the right now he's looking up some information, trying to see what it takes, how long the certification process would be, what he needs to study. He's doing this now as I speak, not far from me. He's doing this so that he can work abroad, so that he can repatriate permanently. While I hope he marries the young lady with whom we're discussing, and she has agreed, the point is that even if it had to be someone else, if she changed her mind or she forced him to change his mind, even in that case, he understands the value of repatriation. He gets it. He knows that that's the pro-black thing to do. It's not just because of me. He gets that because of you. He understands that actually working on behalf of our people means that you can't sit up here and do it on the terms of the gynocracy. He's even come to understand from watching the effects on some of these other men that that if you work for our people, so-called, but according to the terms of the gynocracy and the hyenocracy, that you would actually be working against our people in the first place. He realizes that because he sees what the hyenocracy and what the gynocracy wants. He has heard what some of these ladies sit up and say, openly and proudly. Even when they're nice and polite to him, he's heard what they would say to the ladies in his family. My boyfriend too nice, I'm gonna break up with him. There's this rapper out there I'm trying to get with. He's heard them say stuff like this. One time someone said exactly that. His mom said, you see what you just said? Try to talk some sense into the young lady that said this. And the young lady was like, well, I mean, she could, that right there. He has seen how it is that he has to speak like an adult. He has to choose his words carefully in many situations, but yet and still, these chicks are sitting up here being willing. They've been willing and even incapable of saying better than just the most childish things. Being willing to say not better, but just only the most childish things. But I mean, it's like, and they just go back and forth between, I mean, it's like, I mean, it's like, they can't say anything of substance. And no one checks them for it. He has seen this. Their reproductive and even marital options are not limited by their stupidity and their childishness. But he has to be careful about a bunch of things. He's witnessed this. And this is this information sharing that you guys have done for us, and for which we thank you. I wanted to point out is something that you are doing on behalf of everybody. I mean, you all are doing this with each other. You were sharing information about how you work remotely. Now, I haven't heard Theo Waff, but I heard he's sharing information about this. And I'm glad that I thought about that because I can tell my son about him while I remember before I forget, because I have a lot to remember right now, especially now that the semester started. There is no reason for anybody to come along and say anything about you not being a part of the revolution or that you're a part of selling out. There's no reason for someone to come along and say that unless you were actually being reckless with your seed up in the cervixes of women whose people really don't view us as equal. And even then, if you were taking the steps to mitigate that I talked about, you are giving them the option to be with you, not in the context of living around their people, which would prove that they're really into you. Then you're not even being reckless with your seed. By doing these things, you've done the best anybody in your situation could possibly do. And understand, you're not the only men in the world who have actually seen ladies do this before, to be honest with you, to be honest. There have been other groups where they got conquered, they got trampled, and the conquerors came in and had easy access to the women of the conquered group. This has happened before. You're not unique in that regard. You're unique in terms of the rhetoric that you've had to listen to justify this. You're unique in the secrecy and the conspiracy of secrecy. For them to do this, not be discovered so that they can sit up and project onto you and say that you were selling out. instead of admitting that, hell, it must have been an accomplishment for you to come from a group that so-called conquered and still intimately conquer the women of other groups. One other thing I'm going to say about the pro-blackness of the Black Manosphere and the BMPTs is this. The dating coaches, i.e. dating roaches, are actually a secondary simp, a reverse pimp, collectively. You can roll them all up into just one big secondary simp or reverse pimp, because while the simp just tries too hard in exchange for too little, the secondary simp talks about maintaining frame, but he still talks about doing too much in exchange for too little. And he sits up and tells you to pay for the class to do it. And I want to give a shout out to General Tito for one thing. Now, I don't know why you got a problem with, I think it's BGS. I think you got issue with him. I don't know what that's about. I haven't really followed up, but someone sent to me, shouts out to S. Jock and Senor Kanga for sending to me a link of General Tito roasting the dating roaches. And shout out to you, Mr. Tito, for roasting the dating roaches. They're the ones that actually work against the population of our people, of our race. They do it. And I thought about it as I was listening to General Tito roast some of them. And after a while, I started thinking, well, you know what? Come on, General Tito. Why are you going to roast these dudes about their looks? Why are you going to roast them about these things? And then it dawned on me, you know what? Every single thing for which he roasted them, even when it was superficial, it was something within their control. I realized even when he roasted their appearance, it was something within their control, because you know what? Yeah, they did actually dress kind of oddly. Some of them did. And he looked at Lucario and he said, man, how you going to have lips that look like you drink turpentine? And he even said, I'm not one to roast skin color. But in this case, if you are that black, what the hell did you do to your lips? Now, that's about as close as he got to roasting someone for something that he had no control over. And that's about as close as General Tito got to roasting in a way that we would look at a dating coach if he roasted one of us and say, bro, you immature and that's childish and that's actually suspect. But you know what? I'm going to apply a double standard here, because I think in this case, the double standard is fair. And I'm going to say no, because you see, Lucario, while he doesn't control that aspect of his appearance, Lucario has been provoking the roasting because he's still continuing to do seminars and everything else while he's in a so-called open marriage. Do you really think that Lucario was out here competing with his wife in terms of body count or frequency for that matter? No. One way or another, probably both ways, his wife is beating the stew out of him. Either her body count exceeds his or the frequency of her extramarital tryst exceeds his, whichever one is the case. Whichever one you measure, she probably got him beat on both ends. And that's why it is that husbands don't go to wives and say, let's have an open marriage. That ain't husbands doing that. Not amongst our people. No. And he said, you know, if I was Lucario, I wouldn't wear a black T-shirt looking like under the bed. Now, the only thing I got a problem with that, the only reason I got an issue with that, Tito, is because you were giving him credit for something that I actually have earned. No, I'm the one that gets arrested for going out butt naked when I put on all black. That's why my name is Black Mind. Okay, I'm joking. I'm bragging, Tito. I need to stop bragging so damn much. But on the real though, I was actually glad he did the roasting of them, because what they're doing and what they're preaching and what they're talking about is actually not for our people. What they're into, what they're teaching is actually something that, even though they're not focusing on the black market, on the black male market, the issue is that they are still working against the interest of black men, because they're not telling black men, listen, what you need to do is leave the West The pro-black thing for them to do would have been to tell black men, go ahead and leave the West, and to tell the whites, yeah, stay here and try to maintain frame and try to impress your Becky with your masculinity and your manhood. Instead, what are they doing? When black men say, not even talking about white men, when black men say we get out this mucker because the gynocracy has failed, and this idea of game is not even something that is really that strictly championed even in the wired communities. They sit up and say, you just the B word, and you a incel, and they start talking foolishness. As a matter of fact, Steve the Dean Williams sat up and said to Myron, you ain't even black, you Muslim. Did I not tell you that that was actually a solution for our people? No, Myron Gaines is not racially not black. He's Sudanese. The name Sudan means land of the blacks, or it's like a multiplication of black. It's like a plural of the plural of black. Aswad is black. Sud means blacks. Sudan is like making even more plural. That's what the name Sudan means. It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, Sudan, Ethiopia, Egypt in the form of its old name Kemet, Nigeria and Niger actually are named for blackness. Bet y'all ain't know that. These are areas named for the blackness of the people, either in Arabic or in African languages or in some language derived from Latin. Yeah. And he sat up there and said, you ain't black, you Muslim. And I'm not saying this to defend Myron for the foolishness and the effery. To tell the truth, Myron's a terrible Muslim if he even is one. He actually negated his own faith in something that he said. He said, well, we don't take the shady parts of the religion. We just cherry pick. Those are his words. We cherry pick. We take the fun parts, not the shady parts. Ain't no shady parts. If you're Muslim, you don't say that a part of the faith is shady. But Steve the Dean was still trying to sit up and say that if you believe in something that actually would be beneficial for us, then you ain't black. That's what he was trying to get at. He's trying to sit up and redefine blackness as an ethnicity instead of as a race, when the fact is that when we do go through things, it's not because of ethnicity and nationality. It is because of our race, the DNA sequence. He actually wanted to throw a fit because at least Myron is like, well, look, there are traditional women and you can get some of them. And Steve the Dean's like, why go get a traditional woman? No, why don't you go ahead and be a stepdad like me? Get a big, how do I say this? Get a big bite witch with someone else's kids and have her take care of you so that you can sit up here and pretend like you earning money until you actually do earn money, faking it till you make it by telling other men to accept bad deals, by telling other men to spend all this money, to take their money first, then spend the money according to how they tell you to spend your money that you have left on clothes and cars to impress these broads and maintain frame. So first you got to take your money and give it to them. Then they turn around after taking your money and tell you, now here's the program, go spend your money on a gym membership, expensive clothes, and nice cars so that you can maintain frame in front of these B words. So when you finally do start to succeed in getting their attention, especially below the belt, their attention, you still start off with them having a higher body count than you. They can't respect you. Just like you can't respect them when they got a higher body count than you. You know what? If you can't respect them for that, trust and believe they cannot respect you. They really cannot. Because for one, the body count they'll tell you is going to be understated. And they don't expect you to tell the truth about your body count. So if you have one at all and you say the number, they're going to subtract. So there's this gulf and this gap in between. And the problem is that in our community or population, we already have this problem whether we can't respect each other. We respect them, but they keep losing respect for us. And because they keep acting masculine, we start to lose respect for them, which is a very recent thing. You see, the truth be told, what I'm getting at is that the dating roaches are telling us, regardless of what they tell the white men, that's their business. But what they're telling us black men is to continue trying to get with the broads that are anti-black. That's what they're telling you. And if that in and of itself ain't anti-black, I don't know what is. We cannot afford, and we have not been able to afford for a long time this. We cannot afford this. You do what the dating roaches tell you. What is going to happen is exactly what is happening now, with one difference being that they will then profit off of this instead of the boom shikas and bonquishas and sophistiratchet sapphires being the ones that profit from your efforts alone because you're trying to buy them drinks, buy them clothes, you're trying to do all of this. What they're doing is they're coming along and they're reverse pimping you so that you will, and secondary simping to these ladies, telling you to simp primarily and nakedly and openly. Only this time they're just they're getting their cut too. Same results, same effects, only they're making the money off of it. So they are actually profiting off of the dysfunction and the dysgenic mating choices of the Western hyena for money. We're not selling out. They are trying to sell us out so they can get their cut. Pimping you out to Boom Chic and Sapphire, but still charging you to be pimped out instead of charging her because they're pimping you out. Meanwhile, you can go to a part of Laos. I don't know where it is, but there's a portion of Laos, I think it's a village, where the women outnumber the men so much that they're pretty much just like, look, no dowries, no nothing. Can we get married? Yeah, I'm healthy. I expect to work to help provide for the family. Can we get married? That is the question they're asking. You go to this market, and before you can get into the heart of the market, they are swarming you, and someone has agreed to your terms. That's what's going on in Laos. I've seen that YouTube short. They don't want you to go there because they sit up and say, well, you slam dunking on the moon and bragging about it, but you really, it's not a flex because there's lower gravity. Yeah, but see, the point is that this is not really about flexing. It's just about actual feasibility. And since you're living in the reverse environment in which you really cannot succeed, you can only be given an illusion of success, which still results in you losing half and custody. And then more in the form of child support. Because they wouldn't marry you otherwise. And you still have to propose that too. That's what you're doing. And so, instead of that, I'm going over here to where at least they appreciate me, and it's not in their best interest to try to use me and drive me away. Do I need to be something? Do I need to be good for something? Yes, I do. But the point is that it's not in their best interest to abuse me. So I'm going over here where it's not in their best interest to do that because I'm not interested in doing this to them. And you want to sit up and try to shame the men that would look for some sort of similar. And you know what? If the thing is that if we were really as pathetic as they say, we would have flooded that market in Laos, and the YouTube short would not have been recorded and uploaded so recently because we would have all been over there. If we were really as anti-black as they say, we would have all been there trying to find the palest skinned, longest haired woman from that village. And we're not. So no. When it comes to the black family, you've actually done what I call the proest blackest, even though proest is not a word. But you have actually done the most pro-black thing you could have done with regards to any sort of black family, black admixed or black of any nationality. You've any nationality's admixture. You have actually done that. You, the Black Manosphere, you, the BMPTs. Largely because you know what? A lot of you aren't. Hell, even that brother that married Soraya, she's not a white German. She's a Turk. She's a German citizen of Turkish origin. Different culture. He married her. He didn't go for the so-called Aryan German. No, even Soraya's husband didn't do that. He went for her, and she appreciated him. A lot of the Aryan German women aren't like that. So no, don't let them tell you that you're selling out. You are not. Not at all. You were actually more pro-black than you have given yourself credit for being. You were behaving more pro-black than what many of you are even preaching. You were, without thinking about it consciously, making the best decision for your race across nationalities and the boundaries and distinctions between them. That's what you were doing. I hope that what I've said has been a benefit, and I appreciate you staying with me and staying patient for an hour and 10 minutes. Thank you for listening. And as always, black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum. And black heterosexual, non-select male power just because they don't like it. And black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. And as we dock the jet black aircraft at the gate, I would appreciate it if you all would click on the link for the merchandise in the description and pick up some pieces. Now, eventually, that particular artist, he's already bought the license to use the image that I don't know if it's going to be the thumbnail for this one or not. But anyway, pick up some merchandise. And then if you happen to have anything left over, feel free to punch the Cash App button and only punch in numbers that are going to be easy for you later on. But let's get the merchandise first. Thank you again for flying with us here on Jet Black Airways, where jet black is also a verb. Keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Gender justice forever.